Timothy, commonly referred to as Tim by his buddies, glanced at his cell phone upon receiving a message from Candice, or Candy, as she preferred to be called, his wife of 5 years. He had just secured a service contract with a major company in California, with branches across the nation, and anticipated his boss, Jake Hudson, would be thrilled. This contract meant significant expansion for his IT firm and a considerable salary boost. Perhaps now, he mused, he and Candy could finally begin their planned journey of starting a family. Yet, nagging concerns had lingered since he and Candy joined Jake on a camping trip a little over a week ago. There was a subtle shift in her demeanor upon their return. She seemed preoccupied most of the time and slightly irritable with him. However, that wasn't all. Upon returning home and tossing their clothes in the hamper, he noticed something unusual in one of her undergarments. Picking it up, he observed a hardened substance with a distinctive odor. Suddenly, a realization struck him, and he felt as if his entire world had crumbled. He didn't know whose fluids were in her underwear, but he vowed to uncover the truth. Aware of an upcoming trip to the West Coast, he consulted a lawyer to explore his options if Candy was indeed unfaithful. "Are you certain your wife is being unfaithful?" Ruby Hawkins inquired. Ruby, specializing in family law and divorce, came recommended by a friend who had recently divorced due to infidelity. "Not entirely," he admitted, "but I need certainty. And if she is, I want a divorce." "Well," Ruby began, "most divorces in this state are no fault. You could file on grounds of infidelity, but you'll need solid evidence like photos or video." Tim nodded. "Exactly. If you wish, I can have an investigator monitor her activities to confirm," Ruby offered. "Please do," Tim replied. Tim then asked about what he could expect in terms of divorce proceedings. Given she earned about as much as he did with her teaching job, there was a chance they could avoid alimony. Ruby explained that, with no real estate or children, assets would likely be split evenly. His retirement funds would stay his, as would hers. "If she is indeed cheating, we'll use that as leverage for a favorable outcome," she added. Tim agreed, and Ruby enlisted her investigator, Marvin Johnson, who proposed Tim install a tracking app on Candy's phone. Additionally, he provided Tim with a device to record landline calls and an audio recorder to place in Candy's purse. Though Tim despised resorting to such measures, he felt compelled to uncover the truth. There were other indicators as well. Since the camping trip, Jake seemed more arrogant and disdainful, as if he held some secret. When Candy drove him to the airport, she kissed him goodbye, and he assured her he would call that night after dinner. She responded warmly, wishing him safe travels. On the first night away, as agreed, he called Candy, only to be surprised when she mentioned she'd be working as a waitress at a party Jake was hosting that evening. According to her, there was an emergency. One of the original staff fell ill, and Jake requested her assistance. Tim hadn't heard anything about such plans from Jake. She explained that Jake promised her $150 for the evening, which would be helpful since she wouldn't be working for a couple of weeks. Tim understood her need for extra money, but he felt uneasy. He questioned her decision, to which she responded affirmatively, expressing her love for him before saying goodnight. After ending the call, a knot of worry formed in his gut. He decided to phone the investigator to inform him of Candy's new job. Tim informed Marvin, "Just wanted to let you know, Candy's been asked to waitress for a party at Jake Hudson's house." Marvin confirmed that he'd keep him posted. Tim thanked him and ended the call. The next day, Tim called Candy's cell but got no answer. He also tried the house phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Surely she didn't spend the night at Jake's, he thought. However, his hopes were shattered when he received an email from Marvin that afternoon. Candy spent the night at Hudson's house and is still there. She was quite busy last night. I've attached a couple of photos, but be warned, they're pretty graphic. I'll give you a full report when you return. Tim opened the attachments, and his heart sank. There was his beloved wife of 5 years, engaged in explicit acts with Jake and other colleagues he once considered friends. His hands trembled, and tears streamed down his face. He couldn't believe what he saw. Later that evening, Timothy tried calling her phone again, but it went straight to voicemail. He dialed the house phone, and once again, there was only the answering machine. Seeking solace, he headed to the hotel bar. The next morning, he checked the tracker, which confirmed that Candy's phone remained at Jake's house. Marvin sent another email, detailing more compromising photos and a disturbing scene involving Jake, his son Mike, and several others. Concluding his business in California, Tim returned home with the contract in hand. Upon arrival, he noticed Candy's car was gone, but the tracker indicated her phone was still at Jake's. He changed clothes and called Ruby's office, surprised to learn she was available to see him that afternoon. Tim then tried Candy's cell phone and was startled when she answered, sounding out of breath. He asked where she was, and she claimed she was home, catching up on some work. Shocked by her blatant lie, he informed her he was done with his business in California and would be coming home soon. Candy expressed excitement, offering to pick him up, but he declined, saying he'd take a taxi. After ending the call, he wondered if she noticed his lack of affection. He shook his head, realizing he had to maintain composure until he gathered more evidence. Tim arrived at Ruby's office that afternoon and, without waiting, shared Marvin's findings. Ruby listened intently, then assured him, "I'll initiate divorce proceedings, citing infidelity, and we'll move forward with the alienation of affection lawsuit against Jake and your former colleagues. We'll need strong documentation, but with what you've shared, we have a solid case." "Thank you," Tim replied. "Do you think it'll be finalized soon?" Ruby nodded. "Once the evidence is all in, it's just a matter of filing. Just keep your interactions with her as normal as possible, at least until everything's officially in motion." Tim agreed, though the thought of even pretending to interact normally with Candy made him feel ill. That evening, Tim returned home to find Candy on the couch, watching TV. She greeted him with a warm smile, but he kept his responses short. "I'm just tired," he muttered, heading to the second bedroom he'd recently set up for himself. Later, Candy knocked on the door, asking if he was okay. "I just need some space," he replied, hearing her sigh through the door. He closed his eyes, knowing that soon he'd finally have the distance he needed. The next morning, after Candy left for work, Tim set up additional recordings and carefully placed Marvin's latest report and photos in a safe location. His lawyer's words about maintaining composure echoed in his mind, grounding him as he waited for the divorce paperwork to be served. He knew that soon he'd be free, even if it felt like an eternity to get there. Days passed with Tim maintaining his distance from Candy, and each interaction felt more hollow than the last. Finally, the day of the divorce paper service arrived. Tim waited anxiously at home, mentally preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Candy returned home in the late afternoon, her expression wary, as if sensing something was amiss. As she stepped inside, there was a knock at the door. Tim opened it to find a process server standing there with the envelope in hand. "Candice Burns?" the man asked, looking directly at her. "Yes," she replied, confused. The server handed her the envelope and nodded politely before leaving. Candy looked down at the envelope and then back at Tim, her face going pale as she pieced it together. "Divorce papers?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're serious about this?" Tim nodded, his expression unreadable. "It's time, Candy. You know what you did, and I can't pretend anymore." Tears welled up in her eyes as she stammered, "Please, Tim. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake. Can't we just talk about this?" "There's nothing left to talk about," Tim replied, his voice firm but controlled. "I know about everything, Jake, the lies, everything you've hidden from me. This isn't something we can work through." Candy's tears fell freely as she pleaded with him. "Tim, I love you. I made a mistake, but it doesn't mean I stopped loving you. We've been through so much together. Can't we at least try counseling? Something, anything?" Tim shook his head, the pain of betrayal flashing in his eyes. "It's too late for that. You didn't just hurt me. You destroyed everything we built together. This is the end, Candy." Defeated, she sank into a chair, clutching the envelope in her lap. Tim, knowing he had finally closed the door on a painful chapter, turned and walked away, leaving Candy alone to face the reality of what she had lost. Days following the service of the divorce papers, Tim tried to return to a sense of normalcy, but the emotional weight lingered. He focused on his new job at Empire, where the fresh start allowed him to channel his energy into something constructive. His colleagues welcomed him warmly, and even though he was wary of forming close friendships, he found a level of camaraderie he hadn't experienced in a long time. Tim's sessions with Rose Carlson, his counselor, became an anchor in his recovery. With her guidance, he began to release the resentment he harbored, recognizing that holding on to anger wouldn't heal him. Rose encouraged him to focus on self-growth, and he started dedicating time to the gym, gradually improving his physical health alongside his mental resilience. One evening, a few months after the finalization of the divorce, Tim received a call from Candy's mother, Bernice. She sounded weary but calm, her voice tinged with sorrow. "Tim," she began, "I'm calling to let you know that Candy tested positive for HIV." Tim felt a pang of sympathy, despite everything. I'm sorry to hear that, Bernice." "I really am," Bernice sighed, struggling to keep her voice steady. She wants to speak with you, Tim. Just for a few minutes, if you're willing." Tim considered it for a moment, recalling his counselor's advice about closure. "I can meet her," he replied. "Just let me know when." The next day, Tim drove to Bernice's house. As he stepped inside, he was met by a friendlier, more somber Candy. She looked up at him, her eyes shadowed with remorse. "Thank you for coming," she said, barely above a whisper. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm truly sorry for everything I put you through." Tim, steadying his emotions, replied, "I appreciate your apology, Candy. Despite everything, I don't wish you any harm. I've found some peace now, and I hope you do too." They sat in silence for a few moments, their past pain palpable, yet somehow muted by time. Finally, Candy reached out her hand, and Tim held it briefly before standing to leave. "I wish you well," he said softly, turning to go. Candy's quiet farewell trailed behind him as he walked out, both of them aware that this was their final goodbye. As weeks turned to months, Tim felt lighter, each step further from the life he had left behind. He was a man who had endured betrayal and heartbreak, yet found the strength to reclaim his future. Through his new relationships, his work, and his own resilience, he had found something he once thought he'd lost forever: hope. Months passed, and Tim continued to settle into his new life with a renewed sense of purpose. Work at Empire went well, and he found himself forming new friendships with his colleagues. He remained cautious with his trust, but allowed himself to enjoy his life once again. He joined a local community group, began volunteering on weekends, and embraced every opportunity to move forward. One Friday, Cynthia Stone, a friendly colleague, approached him at work. "Hey, Tim," she said with a warm smile, "a few of us are heading to the hitching post after work. Care to join us?" For the first time in a long time, he didn't hesitate. "Sure, Cynthia. Count me in." That evening, laughter and conversation flowed easily as they gathered at the bar. Tim felt a sense of connection he hadn't known in years, the camaraderie a soothing reminder of life's ability to heal. Cynthia, noticing his relaxation, leaned over and offered a gentle, supportive smile. The evening wound down, and Tim found himself walking Cynthia to her car. They talked about everything, from work to weekend plans, and he sensed something genuine and kind in her presence. When they finally said goodbye, Tim felt a warmth he hadn't experienced since before his marriage. Driving home, he felt the whisper of possibility for the first time in a long while. Memories of Candy lingered, but they felt like distant echoes. He knew he'd never forget the betrayal, but he had grown beyond it. In his heart, he knew he was ready to open himself to new beginnings. The future lay ahead, undefined and free. Tim was no longer the man haunted by his past. He was a man ready to embrace the unknown, with hope, courage, and a renewed belief in the good life could offer. Over the next few months, Tim continued meeting with Cynthia and other colleagues for occasional outings. Their time together wasn't complicated or forced. It was simple, friendly, and comforting. As they became closer, Tim gradually shared his story with her. Cynthia listened with empathy, never prying but offering quiet support. She understood the depth of his pain, but was equally perceptive of his resilience. One evening, Cynthia invited Tim to a community event she had been volunteering for, a fundraiser for the local animal shelter. Tim found himself surrounded by people who, like him, were navigating their own paths and rediscovering their purpose. He felt at ease, watching Cynthia interact with others, her kindness and warmth inspiring a new feeling within him. After the event, they took a walk in the cool evening air, the silence between them comfortable and understanding. Cynthia paused, looking up at the stars, and then back at Tim with a soft smile. "You've been through so much, Tim. It's amazing to see you giving back, to see how much you still care for others." Tim nodded, feeling a calm he hadn't known in years. "It's strange, Cynthia, but I finally feel like I'm exactly where I need to be. Life has been hard, but meeting people like you, people who genuinely care, has shown me a lot, more than I thought possible." In that quiet moment, they both understood that life, while unpredictable and challenging, could lead them to unexpected joy. And for the first time, Tim felt ready to welcome it. A few days later, Tim decided to take a small step forward. He invited Cynthia over for dinner at his place, keeping it casual but putting his heart into every detail. When she arrived, they shared an easy conversation over a homemade meal, laughing about shared work stories and small, silly memories. As the evening wore on, they moved to the living room, where the dim lighting created an intimate, warm atmosphere. Cynthia looked around, noticing small touches of Tim's personality in his home. Books on engineering and history, framed photos of his travels, and a few old pictures of him and friends. "I can see you've led an interesting life," she remarked, gesturing to a photo of Tim at a mountain overlook, looking out over a breathtaking landscape. Tim chuckled softly. "Yeah, I guess so. It's funny, I thought I had it all figured out back then. But life is a way of showing you things you'd never expect, right?" Cynthia nodded, her gaze soft. "It really does. But I think those unexpected things sometimes bring the best lessons. And they bring people into our lives we wouldn't have met otherwise." They shared a meaningful look, a moment where words seemed unnecessary. Gently, she reached over and took his hand, offering a warm, reassuring squeeze. Tim felt a renewed sense of hope, a feeling he hadn't believed possible after all he'd been through. He knew there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time, he felt ready to face them with someone he could trust. Their evening ended with a simple goodbye, a hug that held a quiet promise, and an understanding that something beautiful was beginning. As Tim watched Cynthia leave, he felt the first stirrings of true happiness again. Life had tested him, but it had also shown him resilience, strength, and a path forward that he was finally ready to embrace. In the weeks that followed, Tim and Cynthia continued to spend time together, both at work and beyond. Their connection grew naturally, built on trust and genuine companionship. They took things slowly, with Tim careful to honor his need for healing while also allowing space for something new. One weekend, Cynthia invited him to a local art gallery she loved, eager to share one of her favorite places with him. As they wandered through the exhibits, she pointed out the little details that made each piece special to her, drawing Tim into her world with every shared insight. He found himself not only enjoying the art, but also realizing just how much he appreciated her unique perspective and warmth. "You have an incredible eye," Tim said, watching her as she moved on to the next painting, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "I'm not sure I'd notice half of what you see here." Cynthia shrugged, laughing lightly. "Maybe, but you're seeing it through my eyes. That's what makes it interesting. It's like seeing the world from a whole new angle." In that moment, Tim understood why he was drawn to her. Cynthia had a way of making him feel understood and valued without any expectation or judgment. With her, he felt a sense of ease that had been missing for so long. After the gallery, they went for a walk through the city, stopping at a small cafe for coffee. As they sat at a corner table, watching the world go by, Cynthia finally broached a subject she had been hesitant to bring up. "Tim, I know what you went through wasn't easy," she began softly. "I can't pretend to understand all of it, but if you ever want to talk or just need someone to listen, I'm here." Tim looked down at his coffee, emotions stirring within him. "Thank you, Cynthia. I really appreciate that. It's strange. I never thought I'd be able to open up again. But with you, it feels different. I don't feel judged, just accepted." She reached across the table, her hand resting gently over his. They didn't need to say much more. That simple gesture conveyed everything he needed to know. For the first time in a long time, Tim felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be, with someone who could be a true partner. As they left the cafe, Tim knew he was ready to move forward with a new chapter in his life, one that included healing, growth, and the possibility of love again. He didn't know what the future held, but with Cynthia by his side, he felt ready to embrace whatever came next. In the months that followed, Tim and Cynthia continued to grow closer, their bond deepening with every shared experience and conversation. Tim found solace in Cynthia's unwavering support, and she brought a lightness into his life he hadn't realized he was missing. Slowly, the weight of his past started to lift. Together, they created new memories, replacing the lingering shadows of betrayal with moments of genuine happiness. They went on weekend trips to explore new places, hiked trails that challenged and invigorated them, and even took up cooking classes, a humorous endeavor, considering neither of them was particularly skilled in the kitchen. Their shared laughter and joy during these moments became the foundation of a new beginning for Tim. One evening, as they sat on Cynthia's porch watching the sunset, she turned to him, her expression serious but soft. "Tim, I know you've been through a lot, and I never want to rush you into anything. But I want you to know that I'm all in, for whatever this becomes. I'm here for you." Tim reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Thank you, Cynthia. I've realized something too. The past is part of me, but it doesn't have to define me. I don't have to hold on to the anger or the hurt. I'm ready to move forward, whatever that looks like." In that moment, as the colors of the sunset painted the sky, Tim felt a profound sense of peace. He knew that his journey to rebuild trust, find happiness, and open his heart once more wouldn't be an easy one. But he was ready to take that path, with Cynthia by his side. Together, they embraced the promise of a future filled with love, healing, and hope, stepping into a new chapter that felt as warm and bright as the sunset before them. In the years that followed, Tim and Cynthia built a life that neither had dared to imagine after their respective hardships. They bought a cozy house with a small garden, where they would often sit with coffee in the mornings, savoring the peace they had created together. Cynthia's warmth and unwavering loyalty helped Tim fully overcome his past, and he, in turn, gave her the stability and respect she had always longed for. Eventually, they decided to marry in a quiet, intimate ceremony attended only by close friends and family. The event was simple, reflecting their journey, understated yet meaningful. Cynthia wore a flowing, elegant dress, and Tim, watching her walk down the aisle, felt a depth of gratitude that words couldn't express. This wasn't a love defined by grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but by quiet, steady devotion, by the choice to build a life together, one day at a time. As the years rolled on, they welcomed 2 children into their world, a boy and a girl, who brought boundless joy and laughter into their home. Their home was filled with warmth and laughter, as well as the typical chaos of family life, but they cherished every moment. Tim often thought back to his darker days, but now he viewed them with acceptance rather than pain. His past had led him to a life he never would have envisioned, but was eternally grateful for. Together with Cynthia and their children, he had built a life defined by love, resilience, and the healing power of forgiveness. Looking around at his family one evening, Tim felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had been broken once, yes, but he had also been given the chance to rebuild, stronger, wiser, and with a heart open to all the beautiful possibilities life had to offer. Tim's new life flourished, shaped by the lessons he had learned. In time, he became a mentor to others, sharing his experiences with those facing betrayal and loss, encouraging them to find resilience and self-worth. His journey had made him more empathetic, and he found a sense of purpose in helping others navigate their challenges. Cynthia, too, felt deeply fulfilled. She pursued her interests with Tim's support, creating a balance where they both had room to grow as individuals while strengthening their bond. Together, they traveled, explored, and built memories, creating a treasure trove of moments they cherished with their children. One day, while sitting with Cynthia, Tim received a message from Bernice. She shared how grateful she was for his kindness and for supporting her family during a difficult time. Her message reminded him of forgiveness's power, both given and received, and how it could change lives. As the years went on, Tim and Cynthia continued to create a legacy of love and resilience. Their children grew up with parents who showed them the importance of honesty, strength, and compassion, and they, too, carried these values forward. In the quiet moments, when Tim reflected on his life, he understood that everything, both the joys and the hardships, had led him to this profound peace. From that day forward, Tim's life was marked by the quiet satisfaction of peace and purpose. He and Cynthia devoted themselves to building a life where love and loyalty weren't just spoken words, but values lived daily. Their children grew up surrounded by warmth, learning not only from their parents' words, but from the unspoken bond that tied them together through every season of life. Each day was filled with laughter, shared adventures, and simple pleasures. Tim's past, once a source of pain, became a source of wisdom. He used it to guide those around him, helping others see that even the deepest betrayals could lead to profound growth and new beginnings. The cycle of life continued, with Tim teaching his children to embrace resilience, to forgive when possible, and to treasure the moments that matter most. Looking at his family, he felt a depth of gratitude that words could never fully express. And in those quiet moments, he knew that he had come full circle, not despite his past, but because of it. Tim had finally found a life marked by love, loyalty, and a legacy worth leaving behind.